Okay, thank you. We'll call the meeting to order again. The recording is now working properly. Is everyone back online? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, thumbs up. Brilliant, thank you. Mobile phones switched off or silent mode, please. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Sangster to our first meeting of this committee. Welcome to Governance and Scrutiny, Councillor Sangster. And we thank Councillor McGregor to his previous contributions to this committee. And we'll call now Lynn for the sederant and apologies, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. If you hear your name, can you confirm your attendance, please? Councillor Mabin.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Cogley.
Here, thank you.
Councillor Canning.
Present, thanks.
Councillor Richardson.
Present.
Councillor Sangster.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Todd.
Here, Lynn.
Councillor Lennox.
Morning, here.
We have an apology this morning from Councillor Crawford. Councillor Kyle.
Present.
Councillor Watts.
Present, then.
And we also have an apology this morning from Councillor Hogg. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. We go next to declarations of interest. Was anyone in the room? Councillor Sangster.
Thank you, Chair. It's just regards the Council Recovery Plan, in particular the education and ASN transport. It was just to make everybody aware that my son Cameron currently attends Willowbank School. I am, just for the clarity, I was the chairperson of Willowbank School Parent Council. I've stepped down in that role since becoming elected, but I am still the chairperson of the charity Friends of Willowbank, which supports the school. This is an entirely voluntary role, and I receive no remuneration for it, but I just wanted to let everybody know that for clarity. Thank you.
Just record that as a transparency declaration. Obviously, in the context, this paper has been approved by Cabinet, is here for scrutiny rather than any decision making, which is relevant to any conflict of interest. And the nature of the interest, as you've described it, would not be deemed significant anyway. But if you're happy, we won't get into all that detail, but we'll record it as a transparency declaration for the level of interest you've expressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sangster and David, for the advice. So we'll go to the next item on the agenda is the previous minutes of the meeting held on 5th December. And we have that approved as a correct record of those minutes.
Happy to approve minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. And someone to second, please. Councillor Richardson, thank you. Second. And consideration, any matters arising from those previous minutes, please. Everyone's okay. Thank you very much. Move on to the next item on the agenda. We're at the review of Councillors' Code of Conduct decisions, and we're going to David Mitchell to take us through that paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair and members. I'm conscious that the other item on the agenda is far more pressing and significant, so I'll keep this to a hopefully reasonably brief presentation. As members know, we bring this report once a year on the back of the Standard Commission's annual report, so hence the time lag, because they produce their report for their 23-24 activities towards the end of 24, and you'll see in the appendices the report the business they dealt with within 23-24, and then in the last appendix there's the overrun in the cases that arose in that year that they dealt with up to June, so they try and catch up some of the lag, but obviously the year needs to end before you can produce your backward-looking year-end report. So when we receive the annual report at the back end of each year, we bring it here with this covering paper to bring to members' attention what is going on in the world of the Commission and the Commissioner, the complaints that have been made, the kinds of issues that are arising, the kind of decisions that have been made, and the kind of sanctions that are being applied. We, as members know, and I will say this again, have, I think, the best record of any council in Scotland, and I don't tempt fate when I say that. I'm not shouting at the devil, but when you look at all the numbers year on year since the code first came in 22 years ago, then there isn't any other council anywhere near us in terms of the very, very low numbers of complaints that are generated against any of our councillors by anyone within the council or out with the council. And that doesn't just come naturally. That comes because of the effort everybody puts in to make sure we adhere to the code, and that knowledge of the code and compliance with the code is built into everything we do at meetings and elsewhere. So against that background, it's not of no interest to us, because if we don't keep ourselves abreast of what the code requires you to do, and the thinking of the Commission on what is and isn't a breach, and they don't always agree with the Commissioner who investigates, then you're more likely to fall foul of the code. So we bring it here just to share with this committee, but all members have sight of reports to GNS. I would always say, as a matter of practice, that anything in here is on their website. You can access it at any time. Any member that wants to go and find information on a particular issue or a type of thing, or if you get a complaint coming and you want to go and see how they've dealt with other similar complaints, it is all laid out there. We just bring the summary of the last year's. So, as members know, I think just for the benefit of Councillor Sangster, but again, just as a refresh for all members, the arrangements here are, if somebody complains about the council, then it goes through the model process and then it goes to the Ombudsman. If somebody complains about a councillor, there is no equivalent first stage legally and in terms of governance, and every council in Scotland is the same. The Scheme of Dells doesn't afford or offer any provision for anyone within the council, me or anyone else, to investigate any complaint against their councillors. It is straight to the Commissioner. So if anyone complains about a councillor, at a practical level, if it's trivial, if it's trite, and if it's something someone said and an apology might fix it, we'll have that conversation and give that advice. And if it can be resolved and folk don't follow up their complaints, that's a good outcome if everybody ends up happier than they were. If they go to the Commissioner, then I have a role as monitoring officer. They come to the council to investigate it. They ask me certain things about the councillor in question. Do they behave? Do they take advice? Have they had any other problems, etc., etc., etc.? So we're involved in that process, which is part of the reason, as I say, no council in Scotland has a monitoring officer investigating those complaints. The other main reason for that is in the beginning, there was an apprehension that a lot of complaints might be more politicised or politically motivated, and recognising councils are political organisations. If somebody from Group A throws a brick at Group B, and then it's the members themselves from both of those groups who are determining the complaint at a committee like this, then it's going to get bogged down in the potential political aspect. So to keep it clean, we all rest in the statutory process, and if somebody makes a complaint and it's not capable of being resolved informally with a simple act or apology, then it goes to the Commissioner. The Commissioner investigates. If he thinks there's a breach, he puts it to the Commission. The Commission take that report, hold a hearing, and then decide if they think there's a breach. And you'll note in some of these decisions, they don't always agree with the Commissioner. And then if they decide there is a breach, they apply the sanction. And then, as some members are aware, where it does happen, because I didn't say with no complaints, we had one that was heard last year that will be next year's report. That's that time lag. And as members know from that, where a complaint is upheld, then whatever the sanction, it's reported to the council officers, and they need to put it in front of the council for the council to be made aware. So this is just part of our overall arrangements to bring to members the thinking and, as I say, the current themes and issues and types of complaints. I won't belabour it any beyond that. What I would point out, and this is just my own view, having been through it, is there's one in there, just to give you a highlight, because sometimes the smallest things can get you into bother. It was at page... I'm in blind. Yeah, it was at page 33. At the bottom, case 10 there, a councillor Smith up in Highland Council. Obviously, their arrangements are different because they seem to have officers writing out toward members asking for nominations for the planning committee, whereas, as you know, we just take them at council. So we wouldn't have the same process in play. But as far as I can read from this one, I've only read the rubric, one of the councillors puts herself forward by saying, well, that one will be on maternity leave, and I don't know what she said about the other one, and somehow that became known, and it was found that for assuming, one councillor assuming that another one would go on maternity leave and wouldn't be able to sit in the planning committee and then put themselves forward, you'll see there they suspended her for a month, which seems quite harsh. So I think the advice is always give thought to anything you're putting into correspondence and into print, because the sting in the tail is when they made the complaint about that, they went for the fact she hadn't declared two business interests over the there. So folk tend to go for a kitchen sink approach. So folk often thought, I'm only pointing that out because folk often thought the Commission, you know, were a bit soft where they upheld complaints and some of the sanctions, but a month's suspension for simply wrongly assuming someone else might not be able to take a seat in the planning committee unless there was more to it does seem a bit harsh. So the point is I'm highlighting that the sanctions can include suspension from your duties as a councillor for any period, and in the most serious cases it can actually include disqualification. So, you know, we do have powers that they can apply in the most serious of cases. Two other quick things, Chair, and then I promise I'll be quiet. One is just to say that if you do look at the website regularly, you'll see that the Standards Commission regularly put out updates throughout the year. It hasn't been the practice in the past to share them. I think you get an awful lot of information, but I'm just going to start for completeness, just circulating those on a quarterly basis to all our members for your interest as well, to supplement the annual report. And secondly, and apologies because it was a couple of months ago, I said I would put something out around members registering hospitality, and I will get that out. It slipped a wee bit, but that's sitting with me, and that's just to clarify now that in terms of hospitality you don't need to register anything you accept in terms of the online register, but I'll write out and clarify what I think folks should still be doing just to protect yourselves from the usual complaints that we can get when we're seen to be out there doing council business further afield. So I'll leave it at that. Those are two actions that will follow, not in the back of the report, but in relation to the Code of Conduct and the Council's overall arrangements for compliance with the Code of Conduct. And other than that, Chair, members, it's just open to any questions.
Thank you, David. And I'm looking at paragraph 8, page 9, as these are numbers for the whole of Scotland, and the numbers are increasing a wee bit compared to previous years. And paragraph 10, there's another table, gives a breakdown of different types of things that are reported. Before I'll open it up now to members in the room and online if they have any questions or statements. And please, if you want to speak, can you refer to the page in the paragraph that you're asking the question on? Anyone want in on this? Thank you. All quiet. No comments, no questions on this report. Right, thank you. The report's just for noting, I believe. So we're happy to note the contents of that report then and move on to the next item on the agenda.
If you're agreeable, Chair, I might as well note for completeness the other two actions that are in hand as well, because if I put it in a minute, I'll have to do it.
Right. So it's note the statistical information, note the decisions taken by the Standards Commission, and otherwise note the contents report. Everyone happy with that? Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Also the last item, Council Recovery Plan. Report. Chief Governance Officer, that's Chief Finance Officer, Joe McLaughlin, Chief Financial Officer, Head of Finance and ICT. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, members. I began at Cabinet on the 15th last week or so when I presented this report, describing this as a really important report, and it is. It's the Council Recovery Plan. It was a recovery plan that was a recommendation from Cabinet in August, and the paper before you today was considered and approved by Cabinet on the 15th, and it sets out both the chronology of the service budgets for the financial year, but importantly the actions that colleagues have taken and continue to take to bring budgets back into line, and doing so in two ways wherever possible. Firstly, to reduce that overspend, but more importantly, to examine the reasons for those overspends and the actions that can be taken to recover them for the longer term. The report quite rightly begins with the setting out the background. We go back to 31st of March 2024 and the last day of that financial year. Services, education ended the year £3.5 million overspent, communities and economy 1.5, and wellbeing £6.6 million. And at that point, the Integration Joint Board elected to utilise the reserves that they had in order to fully extinguish that overspend of £6.6 million. And in line with the reserve strategy that you set in February, a council sets in February each year, where services are permitted to carry forward underspends at year end into their following year's budget as a further additional budget and credit. Likewise, when it's an overspend, then they take that as a first hit against next year's budget or the following year's budget, and consequently, education and community and wellbeing carried forward overspends of £3.5 million and £1.5 million. And members, you know from the East Ayrshire performance throughout the year, the reasons for those overspends, and I can touch on them as we go through this report. So that was the 31st of December. We then move forward a day and go into the 1st of April. Budgetary control begins for the 2024-2025 financial year, and that starts around September time when the first East Ayrshire Performance Report is presented to Cabinet in September. Now, that was an unusual report in that it highlighted that if we were to examine the budgets for supplies and services and for third-party payments for those budgets that services that contract with external contractors and the like, then if we were to examine those budgets not by service but across the entire council, then those two budgets will be overspent by around £6 million. Importantly, and having regard to the work that my team do in supporting and working with heads of service, then they highlighted that if the spending plans that services had at that time intended to take between August and March 2025, then there was a possibility that if left unchecked, that the overspend at March 25 could be £20 million across all services. As you recall from Cabinet and from Governance and Scrutiny, a number of measures, control measures were put in place to make sure that that didn't happen. That was around controlling costs, but at the same time increasing the frequency of management information that was supported and provided to members, to services rather, and grateful to my team and to colleagues in procurement who worked at pace to design really bespoke reports for services that gave them information, real-time information around spend, and gave them the ability to either continue that spend or to withdraw that spend based on other pressures within the budget. And so, members, we then split the report at paragraph 11 and we go service specific. So education, as I said, ended the year £3.5 million overspent. Their Q1 report in that September time highlighted that the service was anticipated to end the year around £8.5 million overspent. In October, you heard a report at Cabinet around earlier learning and childcare provision. This was one of the issues that were causing substantial overspend in early years, and members will be well aware of the briefings that were sent out periodically to you around limiting service provision. That report by the Chief Education Officer sought to change that service model and at the same time bring the budget and the underlying reasons for those overspends back into line. It saw a report that that changed that model of service delivery, identified about £1 million of savings, and at the same time injected a further £400,000 of investment into the service to support external provision. And so that extinguished one of the fires that were in the budgetary context within education. That Q2 report for East Ayrshire Performance Report saw that education projection for the year had improved and was around £7.5 million. And on 14th of November, the Chief Executive and I met with colleagues within education to do a line-by-line review of their budget, going through each areas and understanding the reasons for the spend, but taking action to also limit spend. Between the work of colleagues across the Council, CMT, particularly in education, and supported by others, including the Chief Exec, the Q3 East Ayrshire Performance Report, which will come to you in the coming weeks and which will go to Cabinet next week. And this report is unique in that it previews that Q3 report. Then we can see from that report that education will now likely end the year around 2.2 overspent. However, indications from the Chief Education Officer and her team is that that position is likely to reduce and become even more favourable as we get towards the year end. So that balance of £2.2 million will improve further. In doing the work in education and supporting colleagues there, I've touched on the reason to fix two parts: reduce the overspend, but fix the structural issues that taken place within that budget. And those structural issues have been there over time, and services and colleagues have tried to manage them in different ways. You see the recovery plan for education at paragraph 17. The first element of that is ASN Transport. You see that it doesn't have any figures against it, and colleagues are currently working on a report which will be presented to members in very early course. But again, that, as you know, members, is ASN Transport. Another reason for the substantial overspends in education, and colleagues again not only reducing the overspend but seeking to reduce the core structural challenges within that budget too. And moving across to communities and economy, that ended the year, as I said, £1.5 million overspent. The position at Q1 improved; it went to 1.2. And the recovery plan was presented to Cabinet and considered by Cabinet, and also reported to yourselves in the Q1 East Ayrshire Performance Report. That recovery plan listed at paragraph 21. And as we go through the year from Q1 through to Q3, then with that recovery action plan being taken and the actions taken forward, then communities and economy will end the year in a balanced position. Paragraph 23 in the report picks up the position of wellbeing. I've already said around the year-end overspend and how that was extinguished, but the Q1 report presented to Cabinet showed that the overspend was around £10 million projected at September. That immediately led to the integration scheme being invoked and the requirement for a recovery plan to be created and presented for approval and consideration by the Integration Joint Board. That took place at a meeting on the 28th of August. The Q2 East Ayrshire Performance Report saw that £10 million overspend reduced to £6.8 million, and at the same time, a line-by-line review was carried out by the Chief Executive and I to further scrutinise that budget. Because of the scale of the overspend, even at Q2, that led to a further iteration of the recovery plan being created, and that was considered and approved by the Integration Joint Board in the 18th of December 2024. The recovery plan is summarised at 29, further detail at Appendix 1, and it shows that an improved position again further at Q3, where that £10 million that became 6.8 is now around 4.5. Members, this was the report that was presented to Cabinet last week, and it showed, as I said, a position of £4.5 million of an overspend. £4 million, 4.5 of that rests within the Council. That position has deteriorated slightly since that report was considered by another £700,000 because of demands within Outwith placements and a further need to extend a secure accommodation placement for a period of time that was not previously envisaged. So that takes us to paragraph 30 and the Council-wide recovery plan. It shows that through the actions of colleagues within services, but I have also to say, members, as a collective CMT, Council Management Team, working together, then that position of the £20 million overspend will not now materialise. At the same time, colleagues in my service working with budget holders and heads of service have not only sought to support bringing the budget back into balance, but we've sought to resolve those recurring issues that take place within budgets, and which you were aware of, members, as we go through previous East Stage Reforms report. It shows an improving position with a education service at £2.3 million in that position, likely to improve, and an integration, a wellbeing position that was at 4.5, now slightly, but probably £5.2 million. In seeking to support services further, the report considered by Cabinet took account of the money that was released as part of the balances review, together with other items at paragraph 34 and 35 around the service concession additional windfall for a year, and also around a piece of funding received by the council late on in the year. When those two parts are added, there is £6.5 million available, and Cabinet, through a recommendation, considered and approved that £6.5 million be allocated to education to extinguish the £2.2 million of an overspend, with £4 million provided to the Integration Joint Board. So it's been a challenging year for yourselves, members, but also for officers too. It is, hopefully, and I said this to colleagues, the first and last recovery plan that I present, because, as you know from the work we're having in group settings as part of next year's budget, you know that the challenges that we have going forward today will likely remain as we go forward into future years. And so a real need for services to take steps to provide services that are within the budget allocation you provide. Now, I know that's in the financial regulations, members, and I know that may seem a comment that is common sense. I regard the 2024-2025 financial year as the turning point. It's where services are now having to align service provision to financial provision, and doing that with a risk-based approach that takes that perhaps outlook that we once shared, where the operational risk was the area that quite rightly colleagues focused on. I'm asking colleagues to move that dial down a little, so that it's somewhere between operational risk and financial risk as we go forward. So that, Chair, is the report, and I'm grateful to colleagues for their support and for members for their scrutiny on this.
Thank you, Joe. We'll open up to the room for some questions. If I would again ask you if you highlight the page or paragraph where you want to make your question or statement. I'm actually going to go first and go to paragraph 7, page 45. Please, Joe. It's just for clarification. We're talking about £6 million across council-wide supplies and services, I understand. Could you clarify third-party payment budgets and give us an example of what third-party payment budgets is? Thank you.
Absolutely, Chair, and apologies for these terminologies. They are aligned to a SIPFA standard set of objective headings that councils use. So third-party payments are where we contract with another or seek a service from another company. So, for example, an out-with placement that social work will use to, or education will use to place a child elsewhere, will come in under a third-party payment, where we're paying a significant third party for a large part of our service provision.
Thank you very much, Joe. Councillor Cogley, have you two questions?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, morning everybody, and Joe, thank you very much for that. Two questions that I wish to raise, which are of a more general nature. First of all, could you just confirm that we will get to the end of the year and that we won't be carrying any of the overspend into the next financial year, please? And then I'll go on to my second question. Thank you.
So, in terms of this financial year, we have a position where in communities and economy, I'm confident that service, those group of services, through the action they've taken and through the work in the recovery plan, will be in a position to
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Colley, you're back in. Follow up.
Yep, thank you very much, Joe, for that. And I suppose the second point, again, it's more of a generalist point that I wish to raise. The impact of the overspend hit all of us and hit all council services really throughout the year, and we're still feeling that. And I suppose again here I'm looking for another assurance from you that we won't go into the next financial year 25-26 and then in the summer be facing a similar scenario whereby there is all of a sudden an overspend and every service that we have is then impacted upon. So just some reassurance, please. Thank you.
And thank you for that question through you, Chair. So I think two things from that. The first is this has been a really challenging year for all of us, and you know, I don't like presenting reports like I did at Q1 East Stage Performance Report. I much prefer a report like this where we can see the collective team working together to bring it back online. So we have introduced a series of measures that saw spend being controlled and workforce being recruited at either a delayed stage or on a temporary basis, or indeed held until a later point in time. I think that was necessary. I think it's done the job, and I think it's helped change mindset to some extent about the value of the pound and the need to use that pound against competing demands that probably need more spent than the pound that's available. So that part of it, I think for me, is really important. I think going forward, you know, we've got some real challenges, but some opportunities. We've got £2 million added to the Innovation Fund last week, and we have the £4 million 10-year early intervention fund. But when I look at things like the settlement for next year, you know, I see a service called Wellbeing in Old Money Social Work still struggling with demand. And I see in terms of the settlement, and we'll talk more about this in groups and certainly next month, there is no additional money for social care. There is money to support the living wage and other matters, but an injection of substantial funds for social care isn't there. And so I think as we go forward, well-being will find it really challenging next year and beyond, as will most other services. And so those restrictions that we've put in place will remain. They will be softened, I'm sure, as heads of service are within budget and can plan their services accordingly. But the rigour that was introduced, those enhanced points at paragraph 8, I think it was, have been helpful, and I think will be helpful going forward too.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley, for the question, and Joe for the reply. Can I just add, Joe, I'm assuming the increased pressure on social work and the social work budget is this mainly with the population getting older and care at home and folk coming out of hospital and care packages? Is this where the main pressure is on the budget?
It is, Chair, and it kind of masks the work that colleagues are doing. So we talk to colleagues in there, and they can demonstrate the real value of the changes they're making. But the example they give is they may have made a change that saves, £500,000, but the demand that comes in through the front door asks for spend of £600,000 to meet it. So they're being swamped all the time. And so that's why you're seeing innovation bids being made to try and change demand and change the way we can provide the service in order to bring that surety of the support to the structural elements of the budget that you're seeing in other services take place.
Thank you, Joe. We'll go to Councillor Sangster and get a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's around paragraph 18 and 19, and obviously there's been a lot of talk around the ASN transport, which has been, there's a lot of money gets spent on that, obviously. I'm just wondering if we could get maybe a wee bit more detail on that, Joe, particularly around maybe the contracts. Are those contracts that the taxi companies, are they going to be seen out? If they've currently signed, say, a 4-year contract, is that going to continue? Is there going to be probably an alternative to taxis? And also around, just a comment just around the communication of that out to the public. I think we need to be careful how that's communicated, because it's going to cause a lot of angst amongst these families. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, you're absolutely right, Councillor Sangster. Because of all the reasons you've heard, demand pressures versus available resources, we're having to look at everything, not just particular areas. The ASN transport is currently sitting at somewhere just below £4 million a year on taxis. It's not sustainable. That's not to say anybody currently getting a taxi isn't due one, and that's the trick, isn't it, is reconciling all of that. Colleagues in education, as part of their efforts over the budget that you've heard that Joe set out, the recovery plan and to bring things back into line, have conducted a full review of all of the elements, because there are, there are a number of variable factors. There is the identification of someone as having additional support needs. That's the first stage of the process. Then there is that consideration between the school and the council of what that requirement would be against the statutory requirement for transportation to get folk to school. Things have grown into a current situation, as I say, that's just not sustainable at £4 million a year. Colleagues in education have conducted a full review. They are in the processes of bringing that together. They have revised and prepared a draft new policy, which will come to Cabinet in a full report shortly. It wasn't one for during the by-election period, so it will be coming to Cabinet. It's not quite ready anyway, so it's coming to Cabinet, and Cabinet will be asked to approve the new policy and the arrangements for then bedding that in, because what that will require on the back of the new policy will be a review of all current cases on all current contracts. It's more about it's not just about taxis, it's about what's the best way to support folk to get into education, fulfil their duties, but being clear in our duties. There are also some other instances where, there are alternatives that maybe haven't been developed enough, and all of that is in the mix. You're absolutely right that if Cabinet approve the policy, a whole element of that will be the communications strategy plan, whatever you want to call it, but getting that message out to folk and folk being clear on what process will follow the new policy, which will be that individual review, the opportunity to then challenge or appeal or seek a review of any decisions that affect folk. And that will take time. And I think the aim will be to try and get Cabinet approval and bed this in for no earlier than maybe August of the next term. So the headlines are there will be a full report coming to Cabinet. It may well be it comes to G&S for scrutiny, given the importance of that. Going back to our initial question, what we build into the taxi contracts, they are usually, we tender it every 4 years in each package, but what we absolutely build into each contract is it will endure up to 4 years, but if we have to protect the public purse, we can't be paying somebody 4 years if a child moves out the area after year 1. So it's built in that if the needs change, then the contract can be ended early without financial penalty. So we have the flexibility to implement any changes we agree, but the important thing is getting the policy right and getting the review right and trying to get those outcomes right, recognising that at the end of the day, if you're trying to take a significant amount of spend away from folk who have had it and enjoyed the benefit of that, whatever the merits for a long time, it's a challenge, and it will be a challenge, but it's a challenge the council has to face, and the education colleagues are developing the position, and they'll bring the paper, set out the policy. Hopefully everyone will be clear on what we're then trying to do and how we're trying to do it and the period of time within which we'll do it. So it's a work in progress, and you're not wrong, it is going to be a significant challenge for the council, but as I say, along with everything else Joe's outlined, it's not the only challenge at the moment.
Thank you, David. Are you content with that answer?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, David.
You want to add anything, Joe? Are you happy with that? Okay, any other questions from anyone? Anything online? Okay, I'll come back with one more myself, if there's no one else. Page 45, 46. It's the top of page 46, paragraph 8, about expenditure and how you had your meetings. I'm just curious, these couldn't have been pleasant meetings or easy meetings to go through. I'm wondering, without naming anyone or without naming any particular department, if you had any pushback from any of the department managers on any of the measures you've been implementing, or the restrictions in spending, or for example, filling a vacancy where the manager was wanting to fill a vacancy and you're saying it's non-essential, and how those meetings go.
So, got to be honest, Chair, absolutely no pushback, and quite the opposite. In fact, I think at those line-by-line meetings that Ed and I had with both education colleagues and colleagues in wellbeing, you saw the real pain in officers' faces as they tried to balance the budget, but do so against the service that they value. And in some cases, as colleagues have touched on earlier, as they began to review and change the structure of a service that they built up with pride over many years. And I think that was important, both for officers to show that, but I think at the same time, in a way to counter that, it's where then CMT met as a collective to take this forward. Some of those line-by-line meetings were as I described, in terms of the staffing ones. So the workforce review group, of which I'm a member, but chaired by the head of people and culture, meets every month to go through a list of vacancies for approval. That meeting used to take an hour. It's now going to be scheduled, I think, for half a day now, because clearly business cases need to be made so that full justification can be made for those vacancies. At that meeting, that's where we can really see not conflict, but we can see challenge where arguments are made that there is no money to fill this vacancy, and that's countered by a need to provide that service. Now, as the Chief Financial Officer, I find that helpful, because whereas the WRG or the Workforce Review Group can say, okay, fill it, but on a temporary basis, what it is causing is a need to look at the way the service is provided and what can be done differently. So that change is happening too. So it's been an awful year, but it's also been a year when, as I said earlier, there's been a shift, which has been helpful because that will prepare us as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Joe, for the answer. David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, if it helps, just to take some of the pressure off Joe, because as your Chief Financial Officer, there are limits to what assurance Joe can give, and the point is to give members as much assurance as we can in terms of where we're at this year before bringing the proposals for next year's budget to council in February, which will be upon us soon enough. I suppose in terms of the way to look at it, in terms of that assurance piece, is Joe's job on a daily basis and an annual basis isn't merely skipping along the yellow brick road and everything going swimmingly well. He would wish it was. He would sleep more. The position we're all in is every council in Scotland, the way things are, is on a financial tightrope. So that annual journey is we are all collectively on that tightrope and walking along. What this report sets out is that in the current about to end financial year, even we, with our great financial stewardship over many years, have had a bit of a wobble. And if you wobble too much, you come off the tightrope. What this report tells you is the wobble's been managed, the wobble's under control, we are back on the tightrope, but we're still on a tightrope like everyone else in terms of trying to set budgets, balance budgets, live within budgets, whilst meeting increasing demand against, up until this year, because there's some extra money there, usually reducing funds available. So in terms of that assurance, and as Joe's rightly said, nobody's trying to get all happy clappy here. That didn't work for us in the past. What we're saying quite simply is, as I say, that we've had a wobble, we've managed it through all the measures are there, everything we've done. And to go back to the point that was raised there, colleagues aren't willfully taking us in a different direction. Colleagues are struggling, as we all are, to maintain the high quality services we provide in most areas, and are struggling with the whole notion and the concept and the means of reducing that offer and living within our budget, and while always trying to find other ways to maintain standard levels at less cost by using technology, etc., etc., etc. So where we're at is it's still difficult, but it's no more difficult than it was before the wobble, if you like. And in terms of next year, yes, as matters stand now, 2 months from the end of this financial year, Joe can't give you absolute assurance what might yet happen, because not all that spend is under direct control. But with all the measures in place, if we carry on as we are, then the reasonable expectation is we should finish the year along the lines Joe said. But as you've heard, there are things that are beyond anyone's control. The position deteriorating quite an eye-watering amount, as you've heard just from last week, on one out with placement. And you know the position out with placements. It might be the court that says an individual has to be put here and it costs us tens of thousands of pounds, and the week before you didn't even know that was coming. We might not even be involved in the case. They might just be a person. The first thing you get is you've got somebody up at Keir Law or in a young offenders, whatever. So something like that could tip the balance, and that's what Joe's trying to reflect in the assurance he's offering. But if there are no unexpected increased demands in the next 2 months, then we are on track to finish with on balance and to take forward no underspends into next year, which is the absolute best possible position we could be in. Sorry, Chair, I'm conscious Joe's speaking on behalf of the whole CMT, but it's wider than just Joe, because at the end of the day, he does his bit. But we all need to do our bit and live within our budgets. And sometimes folk need help with that because it isn't easy. And you know that.
Thank you very much, David. We'll go to Councillor Richardson. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Chair. No, I was just going to say, I mean, I think all councillors, no matter what party, we have a lot of respect for both David Mitchell and Joe McLaughlin, and we listen to what these guys have got to say. And, you know, we take on board that the council's in a very, very difficult position. I'm still a wee bit concerned about where we're going to go next year. For instance, the services that the council contracts with the IJB for you know, care at home and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I have my doubts that as a council we can turn off the tap of demand. I think the demand out there for those type of services is only going one way, and I don't see how you can stop that tap. I know that what we're going to do is, we're through reviews, we're going to have, you know, people who will find that they no longer qualify for services they currently do because the the qualification bar will be heightened somewhat, and that way you can reduce the amount of services that you have to contract for. But I'm really concerned that there are some people, because of that, will fall through cracks. But as I say, we are where we are, and, you know, these are, it's not a great time to be either an officer or an elected member, I think, because it's difficult times, and we're having to sit here and make really difficult decisions, and decisions that are going to affect the quality of people's lives out there in the real world. So, but be assured, David and Joe, that we, you know, every elected member listens to you guys with respect, and we know it's difficult times.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. David, you reply?
Yeah, I think just to say that, to be fair, so I don't usually do this, I'm just going completely blank. I think the point of this report is to get members fairly comfortable, if you are, that, as I say, this year's wobble is over. The impact of that has been managed, and the causes of that have been addressed, so that it shouldn't be a continuing feature going into next year. And that's the point of this report, is to get members comfortable where we're at going into budget. You have the same difficult decisions to make, whatever your political alliance and allegiance come the budget and council, same as officers. None of us, officers or members, get into the jobs we're in or the roles we're in to be doing what we have to do. Councillor Richardson is absolutely right. And we know, and nobody suggests another right, you can't just turn off demand. It is about revisiting the thresholds and criteria. It is hopefully, wherever possible, not about creating cliff edges and someone with an entitlement suddenly has no entitlement. The more complex and costly a package, it's looking at where the scope is maybe to reduce elements of the package rather than remove a package completely. And I'm just talking generally about adults, children. I'm not particularly talking about ASN or any other area. But remember as well, there are a number of statutory protections. We aren't sitting here as officers, and we're certainly not suggesting you sit there as members and play God with people's lives. We are here to provide services. That's why we're here. If our public didn't need our services, we wouldn't be here. And we always need to bear that in mind. What I would say is that when you look at those protections in terms of the regard we have to equalities, disability, and all the other protected groups, then the four corners are set, the statutory framework set within which we need to create, revise, review, and change and amend policies to the effect that we're working within our legal obligations, but we're also working within our allocated budget. And that is a challenge for all of us. But the detail is where we have any flexibility to try and minimise the impact on anybody currently in receipt of services while we fulfil our legal obligations to our whole community and our obligation to live and operate in a solvent basis within the monies we get. And I'll leave it at that, because it is obviously positive in the sense of, at this point in time, the wobble's over, but it just brings us back to the fact that, you know, we're all in a position we'd rather not be in, and having to now take decisions that will overall ultimately reduce in some areas the level of service we provide, and nobody wants to do that, and we're not doing it for any other reason than we also have to live within our own means. At the end of the day, though, I stress the decision will be yours, members, in terms of the budget paper coming in due course, and I wish you all good luck, because it's not easy preparing it, never mind approving it.
Thank you, David. Councillor Sangster, did you want back in on this?
You know, it was just actually page 48, the table. I was just looking for a bit of clarification on column 7 regarding the removal of central funding for primary swimming lessons. Obviously, I'm just looking for a wee bit more information on that, because it does look 23,000 in the grand scheme of things doesn't seem like a huge amount of money for something that's quite an important life skill. So I was just looking for just a wee bit of clarification on what that's kind of about, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, you want to reply to that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Sangster. It is, as it says, the central funding for primary swimming. So what it's not doing is removing primary swimming. So primary swimming is not a compulsory part of the curriculum. So each head in each school would decide if that's something that they're taking forward. And we advised heads some time ago as part of the recovery plan, we wouldn't be able to provide that that small, as you say, relatively small central budget this year. No heads came to us to say that that was altering their plans in terms of their lessons. So we know that schools are using PEF funding, they're using core school budget, and also parent councils do a lot of fundraising around that too. The budget itself is quite small and hasn't actually met the costs for quite some time. So that's where we are with that one. I hope that's helpful.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor Sangster, for the question, and Julie for the reply. Does anyone else want back in? Any other comments or questions? No? Nothing online. If we go back to page 44, your paragraph 3 was recommendations that went to members of the cabinet. And you'll note that VI number 6 was approval. So for us, you're on to page 45 and it's recommendations to Governance and Scrutiny Committee. And it's just recommended that members note the contents of the report. Everyone happy with that? Thank you very much. And with that, we'll close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance and we can end the recording.